In a world that's just overflowing with information and so many charismatic teachers, it's really easy to feel lost. And while a lot of guides out there are totally genuine, some are absolute experts at using our own emotions against us for control and for manipulation. That's why knowing how to tell the difference, well, it isn't just a useful skill, it's absolutely critical for your well-being. So let's dive into a practical guide for spotting the signs.
Let's start with maybe the most famous warning of all, coming straight from Jesus. The key thing to grab onto here is the disguise. See, the danger isn't going to show up with a big sign that says, "Danger!" No, it comes packaged as something safe, gentle, sheep's clothing, all to hide what's really going on underneath. This really sets the stage for everything we're going to talk about. The most dangerous deceptions are almost always subtle.
And this wasn't just a one-off thing. A little later, the Apostle Paul echoed this exact same idea, but he added that these dangers often pop up from inside the community itself. He calls them fierce wolves, which, that really paints a picture of the destructive power we're dealing with here.
Then Peter adds another layer to this whole thing, the element of secrecy. He warns that false teachers secretly bring in destructive heresies. So this isn't some big head-on attack. It's more like a slow, quiet infiltration of really harmful ideas that can go totally unnoticed until the damage is already done.
And finally, John just makes it crystal clear that this is not some rare, isolated problem. He doesn't say a few. He says many false prophets are out there. This just shows you the scale of the issue. It's widespread. It's a constant reality that we have to be ready for. Okay, so with all these clear warnings ringing in our ears, what do we actually do to protect ourselves? Well, the very first step is to test what's being taught. Before we even get to someone's personality or how they make us feel, we have to look at the substance of their message. Your first line of defense is always the teaching itself.
And thankfully, we're not left guessing. We're given a really clear framework with 4 foundational tests that anyone, and I mean anyone, can use to check out a teaching. Think of it like a doctrinal checklist. You've got the Christ test, the gospel test, the scripture test, and the unity test. Let's break each one down.
First up, the Christ test. This one is the absolute center of everything. Any teaching that tries to diminish who Jesus is or what he accomplished, that's an immediate giant red flag. The core, historically accepted teaching is that Jesus is both fully God and fully human, and that he alone is the path to salvation. Any little detour from that is a major warning sign.
Next, we have the gospel test. This is where false teachers often start adding things, messing with the core message of salvation by tacking on requirements. So the question you have to ask is salvation a free gift that you just receive by faith, or is it something I have to earn through my own efforts, through rituals, or by being loyal to some specific group? A true teacher always points you to Christ, not to themselves.
And then there's the scripture test. This one is huge because it reveals where a teacher's true authority comes from. Do they hold up the Bible as the final word, or do they put their own new revelations or special interpretations above it? You have to be super cautious of anyone who says, "Listen, only I can tell you what this really means."
Okay, so once we've tested the teaching, we need to look at the teacher. Jesus had this famous saying, "You'll know them by their fruit." And all that really means is we need to look at their character and their behavior, because what someone preaches and how they actually live their life should never be disconnected.
And honestly, the contrast is pretty stark. It's like night and day. Good fruit, that looks like humility, serving others, being accountable. Leaders are transparent. They act out of love. But bad fruit? Well, that's defined by pride, by greed, and this constant thirst for control. Once you know what to look for, these patterns become really obvious.
This chart, which pulls descriptions straight from the source, it gives us an even sharper profile. It's almost like a police sketch. And notice the combination of flaws here. You've got pride that just refuses to be held accountable, greed that uses people, deceptive speech that butters you up, and, so often, a hidden pattern of immorality. These aren't just one-off mistakes. These are defining characteristics.
All right, now we get to the heart of how this control is so often maintained, through emotional and psychological manipulation. This is where we move beyond just bad doctrine and into the territory of abuse, using these hidden tactics to keep people trapped.
And this right here is the central question you have to ask yourself when you're looking at any group or leader. Are the demands and expectations being put on you a genuine expression of faith? Or are they actually subtle tools of control designed to make you dependent on the group?
To help answer that question, we can actually use a tool from sociology called the bite model.
It was developed by an expert named Stephen Hassan, specifically to identify the methods that high-control groups use. And BITE is an acronym. It stands for Behavior, Information, Thought, and Emotional Control.
First up is behavior control. This is when the group's influence starts creeping into the smallest details of your life. What you wear, who you're allowed to hang out with, how you spend your money. It's all about micromanaging your personal freedom.
Then you have information control. This is all about creating an echo chamber. You might be told not to read anything critical of the group, or you'll hear any tough questions or doubts get labeled as persecution. The whole goal is to create a bubble where only the group's story is allowed.
Third is thought control. This is where critical thinking itself is actively shut down. They use these simple, loaded phrases. You've probably heard them, like, just have more faith, or don't be so negative. These are used to stop you from actually questioning anything. Any doubt you feel gets immediately reframed as some kind of spiritual attack.
And finally, emotional control. Honestly, this is the most insidious one. Fear is the primary tool here. Fear of losing your salvation, fear of being kicked out by your friends and family, fear of being punished by God. Guilt and public shaming are used constantly to keep you dependent on the group for your entire sense of self-worth. It's brutal.
So, knowing all these red flags, I know it can feel heavy, but how can we proactively build up our discernment? See, the goal isn't to become a cynic who doubts everything. The goal is to become what the Bible calls a Berean, someone who is both open-minded and a really good critical thinker.
So who were these Bereans? They were awesome. They got praised because they eagerly listened to what the Apostle Paul had to say, but, and this is the key part, they didn't stop there. They went home and they examined the scriptures daily to see if what he was saying was actually true. That's the gold standard, being open to hearing something new, but then combining that with diligent personal fact-checking.
So let's wrap all this up into your own personal toolkit. First, know the genuine article. The more you ground yourself in what's true, the easier it is to spot a fake. Second, stay connected. Isolation is a manipulator's best friend, so make sure you're in a healthy community. Third, recognize the red flags we've talked about, both in the teaching and the behavior. And finally, cultivate humility. It's your best shield against the flattery and sense of elitism that these manipulative leaders just thrive on.
And we'll end with this question. Because at the end of the day, discernment is really about taking responsibility for what you believe. In a world with literally endless voices all screaming for your attention and your loyalty, it's worth taking a quiet moment to ask, who or what are you really allowing to shape your understanding of truth?